Hello everyone, this is R.S. Miller at the endtimenews.org and today is October 27th, 2013. China warns Japan over provocation. China says it will launch a resolute counterattack if Japan takes willful measures to shoot down Chinese planes. Chinese Ministry of National Defense spokesman Gang Yangsheng said in a statement issued on Saturday, "If Japan takes willful measures to shoot down China's planes, we will regard it as a severe provocation and an act of war. We will strike back resolutely." The official warned Tokyo not to underestimate China's firm will and determination to protect its interest and territorial sovereignty. Japan's belligerent rhetoric is deliberately provocative. Normal training and flights of Chinese military planes, including unmanned planes in waters of the East China Sea, accords with international law and international practices. China's planes have never infringed airspace of other countries, and China never allows planes of other countries to infringe on its airspaces, Gang stated. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has said that Tokyo is ready to be more assertive towards China. Reports indicate that Abe has also approved a move to shoot down Chinese drones if they fly over Japanese airspace. China has long been engaged in a dispute with Japan over the sovereignty of a group of uninhabited islands in the East China Sea, known as Diaoyus in Chinese and Senkakus in Japanese. At least 54 people were killed in a series of Iraq bomb blasts. 10 car bombs ripped through the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, killing at least 42 and wounding dozens more, officials said. A separate blast targeting soldiers in the northern city of Mosul reportedly killed a dozen more, bringing Sunday's death toll to 54. 9 of the blasts targeted predominantly Shiite Muslim districts over the course of a half an hour, police said. The most violent of those blasts occurred in the town of Nahrawan, south of the capital, where 2 back-to-back car bombs exploded near a busy market, killing 7 people and injuring 15 others. Attacks in the northern Sha'ab and southern Abu Dashir neighborhoods killed 6 people each. Other explosions hit the neighborhoods of Mashta Baladiyat and Ur in Baghdad and the northern Sab el-Bor and Hurriya districts. 6 medical officers confirmed the casualty figures to AP. All spoke on condition of anonymity as they were not authorized to speak to the press. There was no immediate claim of responsibility, although such coordinated attacks have in the past been the hallmark of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, al-Qaeda's local branch. Meanwhile, Sunday's deadliest attack targeted soldiers in the northern city of Mosul, killing at least 12 people and wounding 24 others. A man driving a car packed with explosives blew himself up outside a government bank where soldiers were waiting in line to collect their salaries. On Friday, a series of 9 bombs detonated by remote control killed 16 people across the country as Shiite Muslims commemorated the religious festival of Al-Ghadir. Last week, a suicide bomber killed at least 38 people outside a cafe in a mainly Shiite Muslim district of Baghdad. Violence has spiked in Iraq since April, when tensions between Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's Shiite-dominated government and Sunni groups claiming to be the victims of discrimination boiled over. 2 mortars from Gaza hit western Negev. 2 mortar shells were fired from the Gaza Strip, exploded in Israel on Sunday afternoon, the IDF said. There were no injuries or damage reported. Sporadic rocket fire continues to rain down on Israel from Gaza, even in the midst of peace negotiations between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli government, which by some reports state is going well, while others say it's just the opposite. But whatever the case may be, tensions and conflict continue to mount. Last Monday, IDF soldiers discovered a roadside bomb positioned along the border with Gaza Strip and were able to safely dispose of the device without injury or damage. Approximately a week prior to Monday's incident, the IDF discovered and destroyed a Hamas-built tunnel that went from Gaza into Israel and was said to contain several barrels of explosives. In another incident last week, the army killed a suspected terrorist during a shootout in the West Bank. Islamic Jihad, which often shoots rockets out of the Strip, claimed that Mohammed Aziz was a member of its organization. 9 people were killed on Saturday night when stone-throwing Palestinian Arab youths attacked vehicles traveling south of the Judean town of Hebron. The assailants were targeting Jewish motorists and managed to damage a bus carrying numerous Israelis. 8 of the bus passengers were treated for minor injuries. Also wounded was a young Palestinian Arab girl traveling in a private vehicle. Also on Sunday, a young terrorist estimated to be about 16 years old was arrested this afternoon by the Israeli Defense Forces after attempting to stab soldiers standing guard outside the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron. The Cave of the Patriarchs, one of Judaism's holiest sites, has been a focal point of national attention this weekend in light of a nearby rock-throwing attack which coincided with the reading of the biblical portion of Hayyi Sarah in Genesis, the events of which took place at the historical site. The suspect approached IDF soldiers near the cave wielding a screwdriver. The soldiers managed to overcome the attacker and detain him for questioning. In the news today, we're hearing a lot of talk about a two-state solution between the Palestinians and Israel. A two-state solution to the ongoing Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the Middle East is not the answer. There will never be a meaningful and lasting peace. The efforts of the international community and others to bring about peace and stability in the region will not only fail in its endeavors, but will also be partly responsible for the upcoming World War III. The predominant belief by many Western nations, as well as others, that a two-state solution with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and harmony is a completely irrational fallacy. Having a mortal enemy on the nearly indefensible borders of Israel is not a recipe for peace. Add in the fact that this enemy, its government, and a significant portion of its people have absolutely no desire for peace with Israel, but instead seeks the total annihilation of the nation along with the deaths of the Jewish people in the region, and if not in the world. Unfortunately, far too many people buy into the myth that there can indeed be a two-state solution. Back in 2012, even Stevie Wonder, the well-known music legend, canceled a scheduled concert he had, for a particular time, which would have benefited the Friends of Israel Defense Force. The FIDF was established in 1981 by a group of Holocaust survivors to provide for the well-being of the men and women who serve in the IDF, as well as the families of fallen soldiers. Mr. Wonder made the following statement after being urged by the United Nations to cancel the concert due to the sensitivities over the UN's recent recognition of the State of Palestine as a non-member observer nation and the ratcheting up of tensions between Israel and the Palestinians. Apparently, showing support for Israel, the IDF, Israeli fallen soldiers and their families, is not the politically correct thing to do. In a notification sent to Reuters by Stevie's spokesperson, he said, "Given the current and the very delicate situation in the Middle East, and with a heart that has always cried out for world unity, I will not be performing at the FIDF Gala." Personally, I can appreciate anyone's effort and desire for world peace. However, acquiescing to the request of those who side with terrorist organizations is not the way to go about it. If the leaders of the Arab world and Palestine would acknowledge Israel's right to exist and the rights of the Jewish people to live in Israel, then and only then would a two-state solution be even remotely possible. But as it stands now, the Arabs are not interested in the world's proposals and attempted implementation of a side-by-side coexistence of the two very differing peoples. What they want instead of a state called Palestine alongside of Israel is a state called Palestine in place of Israel. But in order to get a better understanding of this never-ending conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, one must first understand a little of the history of these two peoples. Although their rivalry goes back literally thousands of years, we will begin only as far back as 1946. In 1946, at the first post-war Zionist Congress in Basel, David Ben-Gurion assumed the defense portfolio, including responsibility for the Haganah, which is the Jewish paramilitary underground, which at the time concentrated on the struggle against the British. Although British restrictions, searches, and detentions made the building of a clandestine force with armor and artillery, air and sea power almost impossible, Ben-Gurion decided early on that this was the decisive task: to build up a force in preparation for an assault by the regular armies of the Arab countries, which the Yishuv would have to face alone without outside help. He found the Haganah woefully ill-prepared for such an eventuality and set about energetically to rectify this. Since import and deployment of heavy weapons were not practical as long as the British held sway over Palestine, it was decided that manpower should be readied in the country and equipment purchased abroad to be married in time to throw back an Arab assault, if not prevent it, in time for May 15, 1948, the day envisaged for the termination of the British Mandate and the day after Israel would declare its independence. During the Israeli War of Independence in 1947 through 1949, the war was fought along the entire lengthwise border of the country. Israel fought against Lebanon and Syria in the north, Iraq and Transjordan, which was renamed Jordan during the war, in the east, Egypt along with contingents from the Sudan in the south, and Palestinians and volunteers from Arab countries in the interior of the country. It was the bloodiest of Israel's wars. 6,373 were killed in action from its pre-state days until July of 1949, which was almost 1% of the Jewish community known as the Yishuv, although the figure includes quite a number of new immigrants and some foreign volunteers as well. In the first phase, November 29, 1947 through April 1, 1948, it was the Palestinian Arabs who took the offensive. With the help of volunteers from neighboring countries, the Yishuv had little success in limiting the war, suffering severe casualties and disruption of passage along most of the major highways. In the second phase, April 1st through May 15th, the Haganah took the initiative and in 6 weeks was able to turn the tables, capturing the Arab sections of Tiberias, Haifa, and later also Safed and Acre, temporarily opening the road to Jerusalem and gaining control of much of the territory allotted to the Jewish state under the UN resolution. The third phase, May 15th through July 19th, considered the critical one, opened with the simultaneous coordinated assault of the fledgling state by 5 regular Arab armies from neighboring countries, with an overwhelming superiority of heavy equipment, armor, artillery, and air force. On May 31st, the Haganah was renamed to the Israeli Defense Forces. The IDF suffered initial setbacks, including the loss of the Et Zion block in Judea, the area of Mishmar Hayarden in the north, and Yad Mordechai in the south, but after 3 weeks was able to halt the offensive, to stabilize the front, and even initiate some local offensive operations. The fourth phase, July 1948 through July 1949, was characterized by Israeli initiatives. Operation Yahav in October cleared the road to the Negev, culminating in the capture of Beersheba. Operation Haram at the end of October resulted in the capture of the Upper Galilee. Operation Horev in December of 48 and Operation Yuvda in March of 1949 completed the capture of the Negev, which had been allotted to the Jewish state by the United Nations. Simultaneously, the Arab countries signed armistice agreements. First came Egypt in 1949, February, followed by Lebanon in March, Jordan in April, and Syria in July. Iraq was the only one not to sign the armistice agreement with Israel. It preferred to withdraw its troops and hand over its sector to the Arab Legion of Jordan. In the end, Israel not only ejected the invading Arab forces, it also captured and held some 5,000 kilometers over and above the areas allocated to it by the United Nations. Since then, there have been numerous wars, conflicts, and terrorist attacks. In 1956, the Sinai Campaign fought to put an end to terrorist incursions into Israel and to remove the Egyptian blockade in Elliot. In 1965, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO for short, was recognized with its principal military arm, Fatah, an array of paramilitary and terrorist organizations. The PLO began operations on the 1st of January 1965, at first from across the Lebanese border. Although it has never been considered an existential threat to Israel, it was a constant nuisance and a diversion from the main task, preparations for yet another round of war. In an air battle in which Syria, Russia's closest ally in the Middle East, lost 13 planes, provided the opening bell. As a result of Soviet prodding, Gamal Abdel Nasser Hussein, Egypt's second president from 1956 until his death in 1970, deployed 100,000 troops to the Sinai region. He demanded that the Secretary General of the United Nations withdraws its UN emergency forces, which had been placed there by agreement in order to keep the peace. The UN Secretary General promptly withdrew UNEF from the Sinai without contesting Hussein's demands. Then Nasser announced the closing of the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping in May. The world powers' vague promises did absolutely nothing to reopen the straits, and Israel made the decision to go it alone. On June 5, 1967, Israeli Air Force launched a surprise attack which left the Egyptian Air Force in tatters. Within the brief span of 6 days, the IDF overran the whole Sinai Peninsula up to the Suez Canal, took the entire west bank of the River Jordan, and in the last days of the war, captured a large part of the Golan Heights, including the dominant vantage point of Mount Hermon, and culminating in the capture of the old city of Jerusalem and the Western Wall, which is known to many as the Wailing Wall. Then there was the War of Attrition, fought from 1968 through 1970, the Yom Kippur War in 1973, a war which started on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, the Day of Atonement, and was the fiercest Arab-Israeli war since the 1948 War of Independence. Egypt and Syria attacked Israel, catching them completely off guard. The Lebanon War in 1982, Operation Peace for Galilee, a ceasefire with Palestinian terrorists in Lebanon declared in July 1981 was broken. The terrorists continued to carry out attacks against Israeli targets in Israel and abroad, and the threat to the northern settlements became unbearable. On June 6, 1982, the IDF launched Operation Peace for Galilee. During the 1991 U.S.-led Gulf War against Iraq, Saddam Hussein threatened to attack Israel with various types of weapons, including non-conventional ordnance. For the first time in Israel's history, the entire country faced the very real threat of destruction. Then on July 12, 2006, 8 IDF soldiers were killed and 2 kidnapped on the border with Lebanon in an attack by Hezbollah, the terrorist organization in southern Lebanon. The attack by Hezbollah ignited the 2006 Lebanon War. Its ceasefire called for the disarmament of Hezbollah and the remaining armed camps of the PLO, and for Lebanon to take control of southern border militarily for the first time in 4 decades. Hostilities were suspended as of September 8, 2006, and as of 2012, Hezbollah has still not disarmed and most likely never will as long as the State of Israel exists. But even in the light of these open hostilities and flagrant violations of agreements by Hezbollah, Israel on June 18, 2008, declared that it was open to peace talks with Lebanon. Now moving ahead to November 2012, Israel launched massive air assaults on selected targets in Gaza after Hamas's refusal to quit launching rockets and mortars across the border into Israel, as well as attacks on Israeli IDF members patrolling the Gaza-Israeli border region. Unlike Israel, which made every effort to minimize collateral damage and the killing of civilians, Hamas, on the other hand, intentionally targeted children and civilians in their attacks, launching missiles aimed at schools, buses, and playgrounds. It should be a well-known fact that on multiple occasions, Israel has acted against its own best interest by attempting to make peace with an enemy who has sworn to destroy the nation and the Jewish people. One such self-defeating effort was known as the Oslo Accords. The process began in January 1993 in a meeting with 2 Israeli and 2 Palestinian representatives through Norwegian mediators. From its early stages, both parties spoke of an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Shimon Peres, Foreign Minister for Israel, and Johan Jorgen Holst, Foreign Minister for Norway, reported to U.S. President Bill Clinton regarding the progress of the talks, and in September of 1993, the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and the PLO leader Yasser Arafat signed the Declaration of Principles in the White House in Washington under the Clinton administration. The signing of the declaration had dramatic consequences for the policy of Israel towards the PLO. Israel acknowledged the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people and announced its intent to begin negotiations as part of a comprehensive peace process in the Middle East. Arafat, in the name of the PLO, acknowledged Israel's right for a safe and peaceful existence. Arafat committed himself to the peace process and to work towards a peaceful solution to the conflict. He obliged to abstain from the use of terror and violent acts. He acknowledged the United Nations Security Council resolutions number 242 and 338, and had agreed to approve the necessary changes in the Palestinian Manifest of the Palestinian National Council, which mainly concerned chapters contradicting the declaration of disapproving of Israel's right for independence. Part of the agreement was that Israel would withdraw all of its military forces from Gaza as well as resettle Jewish residents to other locations within Israel. In other words, no Jews in Gaza. Subsequently, in August 2005, this plan became a reality, but still no peace. Just the existence of Jews in Israel are grounds for no peace. The Arabs will never accept Jews in what they perceive as Palestine, a small Palestinian state alongside of their most hated enemy, Israel, will never do, and they will never stop fighting for the entirety of the land. In November 1967, after months of deliberations, the Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution number 242, calling for peace and recognition of the right of every nation to live free from threat within secure and recognized boundaries. However, the Arab League, in its session in Sudan 1967, adopted a different resolution. The three no's of Khartoum: no peace, no negotiations, no recognition of Israel. Although the three no's resolution of Khartoum took place back in 1967, little has changed since then. Saying no to Israel is a fundamental ideology which doesn't even recognize their right to exist. And if their right to exist is not recognized, then any sort of lasting peace is merely a pipe dream. I know that I've painted a picture of gloom and doom, and although there is in fact a war coming which will result in the deaths of several billion people, there is also some good news as well. During these last days events, Jesus Christ will return and set up his kingdom, establishing a lasting, permanent peace, and will put a stop to those who are destroying the earth. And at the end of the Great Tribulation period and the 1,000-year millennial reign, God will set up a new heaven and a new earth, and we will have peace for all eternity. In the book of Revelation, chapter 21, John the Revelator said, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying, and there shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away." Then he who sat on the throne said, "Behold, I will make all things new." And he said to me, "Write, for these words are true and faithful." And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son." But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Are you saved? Follow the link in the box below and pray the prayer of salvation with a sincere heart, and you will be saved. It is my prayer that God bless each and every one of you with ears to hear, eyes to see, and a heart to receive. In Jesus' name, Amen.